I'm muted and I'm trying to talk to you guys. Presenter error number 1. Jen, are you here? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm so glad to see you. When I saw you were doing a session, I was like, I'm on that one. I don't even care what it is.
Nice. Thank you for coming. I was hoping to see some of my OPI people here. I miss you guys.
So how's everything going? Like, you loving your new job? And
I do. I love it. I have learned so much in the last 7 months. And it's just exciting. I've done a lot of really hard things, like so challenging, but it's been amazing. And then the people I work with are great. It's nice. I mean, I do miss being in the office because this is my home office.
right.
I miss people, but I don't regret the switch. I miss the people at OPI, but I love this job.
Yeah, but there's so much turnover right now that,
Yeah.
I mean, you'd be surprised. Most people aren't there anymore.
I know. I keep up with Marissa and Carly a little bit. But are you still in the same position?
Yes. Yeah.
Nice. Things going well?
Yes. There's a lot of new stuff. So they added onto my title. I'm now like the MTSS project coordinator too. And so I'm learning a lot about MTSS that I didn't know before. So that's good.
Nice. Well, yeah, just add on some more work. You can take a third position, right? Just do it all.
I know, right? But whatever. I mean, it's good. We're getting things out and doing what we need to. So
good. That's really awesome. That's nice. Yeah, someday I want to come back to the office and visit, but with COVID, I don't know if the office is open, if I can come back.
It's not yet.
Okay.
Well, and a lot of people are teleworking too. Like I'm teleworking.
Oh, so I wouldn't even be able to see everyone. That wouldn't.
Right.
Darn it. I'll crash.
Yeah.
If you guys ever have like a holiday party, I'll crash it and I'll just come.
Okay, sounds good.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. We're still a little early. I used to work with Jen, so her and I were just chit-chatting. If you haven't already, those of you that are on, there is a very short pre-session question set in the course. If you could pop in there and complete that. Hey everyone, a few more of you have jumped on since I said hello a little bit ago, but if you haven't already in the course, if you could fill out the pre-session questions just so I can get a glimpse of what everybody here, everybody that is here. All right, it is 3:30 and I tend to talk a lot and use the full time, so I would like to go ahead and get started. Dan, is that all right with you, or do you typically do a little introduction first?
No, you're good to go ahead and just get started. That's fine.
Okay, thanks. So hi, I'm Jessica Bryant. I live in Montana, just a few minutes outside of Helena, where the Mountain Moot usually is in person. It's my favorite conference every year. One summer, I even made my family change their vacation dates so that I could attend the Mountain Moot. So I'm excited that you're all here. Maybe next year I'll get to meet you in person. I started my education career as a high school science teacher and dabbled in Moodle a little bit there, self-taught mostly. And then I went to work for the state of Montana Office of Public Instruction, where I ran the Moodle there and learned a ton, moving from that teacher to the site admin role. And then about 7 or 8 months ago, I was scooped up by My Learning Consultants, a Moodle partner. So I am a learning consultant for them, and I do everything from course design to helping people set up their sites, teach them the features of Moodle and so on. Love my job, love talking about Moodle, and I get really excited for these conferences to learn new things from other people, because I feel like with Moodle, it's endless. All the things you can learn, all the places you can explore, new features, new ways to use activities. One of those activities I feel like is underutilized is the lesson activity, because it can be a little complicated to set up. For some reason, it just kind of clicked with me, the lesson and how it works. The one for me I get stuck on is database. Database is like my nemesis that I'm trying to figure out. And I don't want the lesson to be that for other people. So I'm here to kind of help cover that. as we go through this, I want it to be very flexible. I don't have a set presentation. I don't have slides. I have some examples and a set list of things to talk about. But really, if you have questions, please ask me. That's what this is all about. I want to help you and help fill the needs that you have, which is why I have that pre-survey. So I am going to share my screen so we can look at those results and then start jumping into things. All right, can someone give me either a thumbs up or a message in the chat that you can see my screen okay?
You're good.
Awesome, thank you. So we have got a mixture of people here, mostly intermediate. Experience with a lesson expert. I don't even know if I'd classify myself as an expert. I'd like to think so, but there's still even a few things that I get hung up on sometimes. And what we're most interested in, the branching, that's my favorite. So I'm glad that that's what you guys picked also, but we will cover a little bit of everything. And so troubleshooting, yes. Yeah, the progress bar just really doesn't work well with branching and clusters, and I'll talk about that as one of my recommendations later. And okay, yeah, so I think we are ready to rock and roll. Within the course, I have a rough agenda here, but like I said, please just interrupt me, type in the chat, speak up when you have any kind of questions or things you want me to go over again. I am more than happy. Okay, first thing, I'm actually going to pause talking for a moment. And if you haven't already, I want you to go through these 5 lessons. There are 5 different versions here. And it just kind of sets the stage to give you a little bit of experience, see the different types. So there's the linear, where you just go next, next, next. And then there's the branching, where you can kind of go all over the place and come back in different paths and such. So I will give you, you don't need to read the full content, but just kind of experience what it's like to go through those. So I will give you 4 minutes to do those. And I will sit here and I can answer questions if you want to ask anything in the chat or speak up.
Hi, I popped in a little late. What's a Q page?
Oh, that's just short for question. So it's without a question page and then with a question page. And I'll explain what that means and what those look like and how to set it up here in a little bit. I just want you to give it a try. And yes, Sylvia, I will give you, I can either download an MBZ file so you guys can just take these onto your own sites and mess with them, or give you editing access to this course when we're finished so that you can dive into those settings and see. Yeah. Don't even forget though, I'll make a note too. All right, so we'll do, I think 2 more minutes. I was not good at looking at the time when I said you had 4 minutes. So we'll do 2 more minutes for you to poke through those if you haven't already. All right, just a little bit longer. If anyone's still jumping in and you're wondering why we're silent, we are taking a couple minutes just to explore these examples. Okay, as the last few people are finishing exploring those, is there anything you noticed that was different between those? Maybe it was something you saw on one type, but you didn't see on the other type? You can speak up or type in the chat. How about this instead? Is there any of those 5 examples that you really liked, or you can relate to something that you'd like to do in your position?
I liked the monkey one.
Isn't that one fun?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that one fits in well, kind of with what our keynote said this morning, of right, bringing in a little bit of fun and humor and play. That example was made for a K-12 client that they could use, you know, for an icebreaker in an elementary classroom or to get them used to using the system. But you could take that same kind of scenario and change it to be more applicable, like a role-based learning. I often think of, anyone here read the Goosebumps books when they were little? Like you come out of your house and you see a monster. What do? You know, run back inside. You go to page 12. Fight the monster. Go to page 72. And you kind of get to choose your own adventure. That's really what the lesson makes me think of. Yes, finally. Thank you, Leah. A lot of people are like, Goosebumps, you're weird. And don't really, either don't know what they are or think it's very odd. But really, the power of that lesson is to build in that experience and that scenario that you could maybe do in person, but if you're online, maybe you can't be in person doing those kind of things. The linear examples can work great, like the first one, the volcano example, where you just went through and delivering content. But that same thing you could do in a book activity, and a book is much easier to set up than a lesson is. So in that case, if you're just covering content, delivering it, a book might be a better option than a lesson. I'm not here to tell you that a lesson is the end all be all for everything, because it isn't, right? But it has scenarios where it would be very useful. So branching is the first one. The second big difference with a lesson compared to other activities is the activity completion settings. You can actually have a time requirement. So it's really nice to be able to track time if that's, you know, if that accountability piece is really important to you. That is a feature within there. Yes, Tabitha, it will, if you have questions set up and there's point value, it will add it to the grade book. We'll look at those settings here in just a moment to make sure that you have the grade turned on. Or alternately, if you don't have questions, you want to make sure you turn the grade off so that it doesn't show in the grade book worth points when it shouldn't be there, and then thus confuse you or your students and mess with your point total. So really, my favorite applications for a lesson is when you have those question pages, right? You want to build in those little check for understandings along the way. And then also the branching examples. You can do a scenario. You could have, on that fourth example was by user choice. So they got to pick, you know, which one do you want to learn about first? So a little bit of that differentiation built in there to let the user have control over what they want to see first or what they want to learn about. There, oh, I didn't go back far enough. And then by role, which is really the same thing as the previous one, exact same setup, but instead I just used a role to split it. And we're going to look at the settings of each of these in detail and how I set up that branching and what it looks like once we dive into those settings. Okay, I am gonna come back here and I'm gonna build this in our example section so you can see it later if you want to and look at those settings.
Hey, Jessica,
Yes.
is it best practices to pick one and stick with that kind of format, or is it okay to do a little bit of the content and questions and then do a lesson and implement more than one?
So that kind of depends on your course as a whole, right? I wouldn't overuse the lesson necessarily. You can make one giant lesson with everything in it, but it's wise to chunk things out and break them up. So as people come and go, they know where things are versus have everything clumped into one. There's also something to be said, and there's two sides to this, right? Consistency. So your users know what they're going to get, where they're going to have the questions, the general format, so they're comfortable and they focus on the learning versus figuring out the system. But then there's also that variety, right? Because if you do page, lesson, page, lesson, page, lesson, then people get a little bored too. So I would say it's kind of best to map out what you want that experience to be. You know, think about your own learning experience as a student in courses, what you liked, what you didn't like, and design from there. So it's not a solid answer because there isn't necessarily a right or wrong there, but it has flexibility. Okay, so we are going to add our lesson and look at some of these initial settings. So of course we have our, I'm just going to call it demo. I don't typically do a description, but I know a lot of people do. You can have it show up on the course page, but I like to keep my course page nice and clean. So I tend to leave, for lessons anyway, the description blank. Under appearance, the first two big settings are the progress bar and display menu. And if you were doing a linear lesson where there is no branching, I would say turn both to yes. That would be my recommendation. The progress bar is what you see along the bottom, and then the menu is off on the side like a table of contents. But if you get to branching, the progress bar will never get to 100 unless they view every single page. And typically branching means people don't look at every page, right? They choose the path based on their selections. So branching, leave those as no for progress bar. Menu, it's up to you if you want people to see that menu and be able to skip around. I tend with branching to say no, but you can still have that as yes. And then under show more are some more settings sneakily hidden away. Most of these you can leave alone, but there's a couple that you can play with here that we'll probably come back to a little bit later. One of them that I do like, depending on your version and your theme, is this link to next activity. So in newer Moodle versions, you have that activity link at the very bottom where you can do previous and next, and then there's a jump menu kind of at the bottom. If you don't have that, this link to next activity can be helpful. I'm going to pick one here just so I can show you. I'm going to choose the monkey business, and this will show up on the end of lesson page. So we'll circle back to this. Availability, I wouldn't worry about this unless you have a set timeline in your course and you want to limit access to it. Even with the other settings in here, unless you're getting really fancy, we're going to kind of ignore the availability section. Flow control, this allows student review. So this gives them a link when they get to the end to review the lesson. I 99.9% of the time turn this to yes. So that's an easy way for students to go back through the activity. If you are going to do question pages, I'm going to do show more. These settings here come into play a little bit, and these are really, the way you set up the individual question in combination with these settings, you can get various results. So when we do question pages, we're going to come back to this, but this is a good time for me to mention. One of my biggest recommendations is always to test it. You build it as a teacher, you know exactly how you want it to flow. as a teacher role to the course, you can kind of override those normal student settings and jump around. So always, always, always have a separate student account where you log in and test this, especially with those questions, so you can make sure it behaves how you want it to. So you try the question, oh, that doesn't work how I want it to. Come here and change one setting and then try it again. It still doesn't work, change a different one or change that one back and try another one. So that testing is really key, especially with these lessons when you get branching going on. These can make a big difference there. In the grade section, lessons default to always being worth points at 100 points. But if you're not going to have question pages, go in here and set this to none. Because then you're not going to have it show in the grade book when no points can actually be awarded. I would leave practice lessons set as no, unless you have some kind of scenario where people get to maybe audit the course or get a preview of the course before you actually want to record attempts. But I haven't seen a good use case for the practice lesson yet. Common module settings we can ignore. Restrict access is just like any other activity, so I'm not going to go into those. And then activity completion. What I love here, I'm going to switch this to the conditions, is the time, right? So there's an argument whether time should really matter or not, which is very valid. But if that accountability is really important to you, you can set time in here. So let's say there's a 20-minute video that people must watch in your company. Maybe it's a harassment video and it has to be recorded that people watch the video. You could set this to 20 minutes. Now, if it's a 20-minute video with like 30-second intro and then like credits at the end for a minute, maybe set this to 18. So you don't get people saying, I watched it, when really they paused towards the end and just missed, they're like 10 seconds short, right? So I'd go a smidge less on there. And then the other important one is they must reach the end of lesson page. So they could view it 100 times, but if they don't get to the very end, then they can't actually finish the activity. So that's what I tend to set mine just as this, that they reach the end. You can also say that they view it, but that's redundant because they have to view it anyway to get to the end of lesson page. So it's really not necessary. All right, I'm going to pause here. Any questions before we dive into setting up the actual pages of the lesson? Okay, I'm going to keep rolling, but if something comes up, please put in the chat or speak up. So when you first save it, you come into this view and you have 2 rows of tabs, plus this section here that asks you, what do you want to do first? So let's start building a couple of pages and then I'll go through these tabs so that makes a little more sense. You can import questions, which this is why I wouldn't say I'm a full expert because I've never actually imported questions into here before. It's something I've always wanted to play with. But we have 3 different things to do next. A cluster I've only used once is basically a group of question pages that you cluster together and will show up kind of at random in the sets of questions. I tend to just build in the questions that I want people to see and that I want them to answer. But if you like those random questions to be popped in, the cluster would be a route to go, but it's a little more complicated, right? So if you're just getting started, just forget about cluster. Come back to it in a year once you're more comfortable with the lesson. A content page is just like it sounds, content page. You can add text, links, images, videos, really anything you can do with HTML, you can stick in your content page. And then a question page, you can do multiple choice, true, false, a handful of others, which we'll look at in a minute. But let's go ahead and do a content page first. Call this our intro. Pretend like we added some text there. And then down here, we have these content sections. And back when I was at OPI, I would get this question a lot of like, content, do I need to put my content down here? And really, it's not actually content. These are the buttons. Actually, on one of my clients' site, I changed their language pack to say button 1, button 2, button 3 to take away that confusion. So your first button, let's say we want it to say next. So that's what it would look like, the text at the bottom. And then the jump is where you select the page that it goes to. So if I leave this as is, there will be a button that says next, but I'll click it and it will reload the same page because it's set to this page. So they would be stuck in an endless loop of reloading that same page over and over. So instead, you want to change this to one of the options. So you could do a random content page, right? You can have the system randomly pick a page, which I've not actually seen a use case for. If anyone has used that, I'd love to chat with you at the end to see, how you used it and how it was useful to you. But if you want them to go to the next page, you pick next page off this list. We can set up to 5 buttons. Here, there is a setting to change it so you can have more than that, and we can come back and look at that later if anyone wants to know. So I'm going to save this, but we don't actually have a next page. So if we were to preview this and hit next, it wouldn't go anywhere. So let's build one more page.
So Jessica, the different contents, and you said you could create more buttons. Would those be the buttons like when you were choosing if you were a teacher, if you were admin, or a little of everything?
Exactly, yes. And we're going to do that. We're going to build kind of a linear one, and then we'll do some branching and build those in there too. All right, so we're going to add another content page. And now here, let's say I want to give people the option to go forwards and backwards. So I'm going to say previous, and you can put a whole sentence in this description field, anything you want. And then I'm going to change my jump to previous page. And then I want this one, the next other button to say next, and then it already is at next page. So we'll leave that as is. So now we can go in and preview this. So looking at your tabs, there's the preview tab, there's the edit tab, which we're on, and under edit, I love this, that there's both collapsed and expanded. So collapsed shows you just the title, what type of page, and where your buttons go to, not the names of your buttons, just where they go to. And that comes in super handy for your branching a little later. The expanded version shows you each page with your editing and various other buttons, the text you put, the name of your button, and where the button goes. Then it gives you options, like if you want to add a content page, it would insert it between these two. Or here's the second one I built. I could add a new content page here. This view gets confusing when you have more than 5 pages, I feel like. So I tend to default to the edit collapsed view because it's just nice and clean. I can see all my pages. I can see my jumps. The preview, you can go here. This is where you want to test it. So this is my intro page, my next button. And then here's the previous and next buttons I built there. I don't have a next page. So that's going to kick me to the end of the lesson, which we don't want yet. But this is kind of your initial content pages. Now let's add a question page. So we're going to go to our actions drop-down list and add a question. And here it's going to let you pick between these 6 options. Multiple choice is a good one, good easy one to start with. But you can do any others. Short answer is hard. An essay is hard unless you're going to manually grade it. So if you want this to be an asynchronous or self-paced course, I would stick to matching multiple choice, numerical, and true false. But it is good maybe in a facilitated or semester-long course where you're a teacher, you can experiment with the others because they're definitely useful in certain cases. I'm just going to build multiple choice to make it easy. Call it question 1. So then you put in your answers. And then response, this is like the feedback that they would get. So personalized feedback based on each question. And this one is not the right answer. So I'm going to say this page and score is 0. So if you want them, they must get the right answer. For any wrong answers, you want the jump to go to this page, meaning they see their feedback and then they're kicked back to the question again, and they have to keep trying until they get it right. And then blue, we'll say that that is right. And so we wanted them to be able to proceed. So we say next page, and we want to give them a point. So now we can, another way to preview besides the preview tab on any of these, and when you're in collapse view, there's the plus icon, we can preview. So I'm going to jump into our second page and start there. And I say next, and it will pop me to the question. Now, if I say yellow and submit, it reloads again, and it's going to show me the question, my answer, and then the feedback I gave. If I hit continue, it pops me back, and I have to get it right before it will let me move on. We don't have a next page, so it kicked me to the very end, which we'll talk about here in a moment. All right, so back to editing. Editing, when you are starting a brand new lesson, which I'm going to delete these just for demo purposes. And you want to have it branch. So let's say, let's go in and edit this one. Say pick your path. And then I'm going to expand all of these. Let's say you want beginners to go one path, intermediate to go another path, experts to go one way, and pros to go another one. With this, you can't have them all go to the next page because they would go to the same page and not actually branch. So what we need to do here is build those pages before we can set these jumps. So this is the part that confuses people sometimes. So I recommend you build this first page, set your buttons, and then save it, even though the buttons aren't right. Then we need to build the rest of our pages. So content, this is my beginner. Add my text. Let's say we're just going to branch here. So we're going to do the intro page, and then they branch and everybody views their own individual, and then we're going to end the lesson. So I'm going to say all done. And the jump, in this case, when you want someone to be finished, it's best for your final jump to go to the end of lesson page. So that signifies that end of lesson page, if you remember from the activity completion, that they must reach end of lesson for it to be complete. So here we want to make sure that jump takes them to that. And I save my page. So I have my beginner. I could go back in here and link this first jump to beginner, but I want to make all my pages before I set my jump, so I don't have to do it once. And instead of remaking the page, I'm actually going to duplicate this with the double square icon. Do it a few times because I had 4 of them. And now I'm going to go in and edit each one. A lot of times when I'm building these branching lessons, I'll first draw it out on paper, and sometimes with sticky notes, so I can move it around, draw arrows. I know what my flow to be, and I'll just have a general description of the content on each little sticky note. I won't type it all out yet. And then I'll go in and I'll build my pages, and I'll leave them like this, and I'll just say add text or add content. So I set up my structure first and make sure that's good, and then I worry about the content. Because if you're trying to do both at the same time, sometimes you kind of get stuck and you're not really sure like where you messed up. Did I do the content here? Did I do my jumps there? I don't know. But if you have that map, if you have that road map with your sticky notes or a marker board, something drawn out so that you can then go in like, all right, I need 12 pages. And then you can build your 12 and then go back and do your jumps. So here I've done my 4 branches or the 4 new pages I want people to split to. So I can go back to the intro and to my content or buttons and change the beginners button. I want to go to the beginner page. My intermediate page, I can speak normally, goes to the intermediate page. Expert button goes to expert and so on. Save this. Now from this edit collapsed view, it's handy. You can see that I've set my jumps here. So at the end, when you're checking yourself, if these all still said next, you know that it's not right. You want them to be able to split, but here I see I have set my buttons and they'll go appropriately. So if we preview, now I can see those 4 buttons. If I pick one, it goes to that page. And then all done would take me back to, or to the end of the lesson. I'm gonna hit the back button. If I choose experts, I go to the expert page. So those branching ones, I know I said it out once, but I'm gonna say it again, draw it out first, because otherwise you're gonna get lost. Map it out, break out those sticky notes, stick them on your wall, on your desk, wherever it may work. Map that out, build your pages, and then go back and set up those jumps to link throughout. And I often will do jumps, I'll split people, and then I bring them back together at the end, which is what we did with the, I think by roll one, I did this. I'm going to go into edit. Yes, so what I did here at the introduction page, you got to choose teacher, site admin, or you wear many hats. And then it splits you to one of these 3 pages. Then I gave the option on each page to go back to the introduction because maybe they changed their mind or want to see multiple, right? So give them that option to go backwards. And then each page then goes to what I call easy access, which is the name of the last page. So that's the split, and then where they all come back together at the end. So you can give everyone the same intro and the same exit information, but what they see in the middle is customized to their role or personal preference. So it's a really handy way to differentiate without having to build 4 different activities within a course. You just build one that splits and then brings them back. The others, let's go look at those. We'll do monkey business last because that one's the most complicated. The user choice one, if we look at edit, so this is the one where you could just pick whichever one you wanted. It went one of the 5 places, and then you could either go backwards to look at more or go to the end of the lesson. That was totally up to you in that scenario. So it's very simple. You could have this go from introduction, and if they chose page, maybe there's page part 1, page part 2, page part 3. So your branches can be as long or as short as you want them to be. This demo, I just built 1 page per branch.
So Jessica, if you wanted them to go back in and complete each of those, you wanted them to look at page and book and lesson or whatever, could you then say go to one of the unanswered or what?
Yes, yeah, then you would use those, the drop downs under, let's just go look. I mean, in that case, if you want them to view everything, a linear lesson is probably the way to go. And you just take them from one to another. But if you still like to give that choice, like that illusion of choice, even though you're going to make them see everything, you would instead do, instead of review another going to introduction, I would get rid of this option. And see, they can't say they're all, well, you have to be able to finish eventually, right? So you do need that done button. But instead of this jump taking them to introduction, you could change it to random content page or unseen. We don't have a question here, but you could try this random content page. But really, if you want them to see everything and that's important to you, just do the linear, because then they're not going to be like, well, I think I missed label, but I'm not sure. Did I view the H5P? I don't know. And you don't really know for sure as the instructor if they got through everything unless you make it linear. So the branching tends to be better if that flexibility is okay and it's okay that they don't see every page.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I'm going to go into the volcanoes with question pages. This one, just because I wanted to see here under the page type column, I can see my content. This is a content page, and then this is my multiple choice page, and this is my matching page. So I can see at a quick glance what type of things I have built here. All right, let's pop into the monkey business. So this is one where you definitely have to map it out before you start. So you know where you want people to go back to so they don't get stuck in a loop. So there is at some point a way out to the end of the lesson. I actually started to build a much more complicated one about living at the base of Mount Vesuvius and how you would react to earthquakes and various things. But it was taking me forever to build. I didn't get it quite done. So even if I get it done, I'll stick it in here for you all to see. But these can get quite long and complicated. So it is good, again, to make sure you test it and map it out along the way. Okay, I'm going to pause for questions here.
Hey, Jessica, this is Rick. Quick question. So you seem to be, you seem to not click on end of lesson purposely there. What does it do when you click on end of lesson? Is that a page you set up, or are there actions that automatically happen behind the scenes when you do that?
Let's go ahead and do that. That is a very good question. Okay, so let's do these types of volcanoes because it's the most simple. I've already done this once as my test as a student role, so that's why it says 100% already. So I'm going to click through to the end. I was a science teacher, if you can't tell. I love volcanoes. I want to chat about volcanoes.
Who doesn't love volcanoes? I mean,
yeah, I did a semester in Hawaii in college and I almost didn't leave. Almost stayed forever. So this is your standard end of lesson page. This text here is standard across every lesson. You can alter it in the language pack, but then it applies to every single lesson. I do wish, that's one thing I could change about a lesson is that I can customize this end of lesson page per activity or per course versus applying to all lessons site-wide. So that is going to be a standard piece there. And then if you remember me in the settings talking about turning on that setting for reviewing a lesson, that's where this button, this link here comes from. So it's an easy way for people to pop right back into the lesson, back to the start of the activity. And it will always have this return to getting or return to, and then the name of your course to take you back. If we go into the settings, my son and my husband just got home. I need to close my door really quick so that, or they'll be okay. I'll leave it. So if under appearance and show more, there's this link to next activity. So we can turn this on. So my next one was, I think it was getting to know Relax. They don't show an order of the course. They show alphabetically, first by activity type, then name of activity. So you have to know the order of your course. Let's pretend it's that one. So save and display. I'm gonna again click through to the end. And now there is a link for go to and then the name of the next activity. So that's another way you can just direct people right away to that next activity. Most sites now have this at the bottom. The next activity is already built in for you. So I chose the wrong one in my settings. So typically don't use this anymore, but it is a good option there. So in my demonstrations, Rick, I didn't click to end of lesson. So I'm glad you asked that question so I could demonstrate this.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, and let's see, Dan had a question. Can you use groups in a lesson to determine direction as well? Ooh, I don't think so. Let's look really quick. I'm gonna go to edit because it is all on the buttons and you can't change. There's no setting to say like restrict access to this button based on being in group A versus group B. That would be really cool if you could. In that case, if you wanted to restrict access to the activity itself based on groups, that would be, you go to edit settings for the whole lesson. And then in restrict access, you could set, I don't have groups set in the course. If there were groups set up in the course, there'd be a group button here. And you could say you must be in group A to see this lesson. You must be in group B kind of thing. So unfortunately, no. If you had people that you, I'm going to save and display. If you wanted people to do it self-select, you know, if you're in group A, go here. If you're in group B, go here and let them do it themselves. You can do it that way and just name your button group A, name your second button group B. But you can't force it. Valerie, yeah, you can restrict the activity as a whole based on their profile, but not the button they see within the page. So that is, if we go back to edit settings for the full activity, that is just here under user profile. That would be really cool to do it within the lesson. If any of you are developers and have some free time, that'd be cool if you could do a modification to the lesson and share it out with the world. Be very cool. Okay, we still have 6 minutes for questions. This is like the most time I've ever had at the end of a presentation.
All right, so this is Rick. I'll jump in with another question if no one else is in there. So tell us a little bit about the nuances you found in terms of how it interacts with the grade book and pluses and minuses. For example, can you put questions, multiple choice questions in there purely for the sake of branching versus grading? You know, what are some of the nuances you found and things you wish you knew about how questions and the lesson interact with the grade book?
So with the grade book, you can have questions in there and turn off the grade in the settings so it doesn't actually show in the grade book, right? If you say the score doesn't actually matter, I just want you to go through the questions, then in the edit settings for the lesson as a whole, turn off the grade. If you do want it to show in the grade book, turn editing back on. If you do want it to show in the grade book, make sure under edit settings that your grade is on, and you can do scale or point. Point is easiest. Scale you can do, but that's really only if you're going to do an essay question in there, and that's that manual intervention, that manual grading. You can also set the grade to pass, right? And that can be part of, or wait. No, it can't be, so I'm going to unblock this one. So a lot of things with grades, you can say they must receive a grade and then it must be a passing grade. But here you can only say that they must receive a grade to complete the activity. So if you want them to get 100%, you could say max grade is 100, grade to pass is 100, but the activity is still going to check off and let them move on. So it's a little deceiving. So you'd instead have to set a restriction on the next activity that says, you know, must have grade of 100% in that lesson. So you can still make it work for that grade to flow through there. I'm gonna go back in, save and display. And our collapsed view, I don't have a question page. So I am going to, even though this is out of order, I'm going to add one here. I have never actually done, I thought you said minus, I've never done negative points. I don't know if a lesson can do that. Has anyone here tried a lesson with negative points? I think, yeah, it's probably only 0. I mean, you don't really want to take away points from people. You just, want to not award the point should they get it wrong. And you definitely can. I believe you asked if you can branch based on their response. Yes. So that's a great way to cover misconceptions. Like if it's a really important topic, ask a question here. And if they get it wrong, have the jump instead of the next page. Maybe there's a branch you set up that's called review. And then they have to go back into a deeper dive of the content where you correct that misconception. Then you kick them back to the same question once they go through that review, and they've got to get it right. Otherwise, they're going to be stuck in a loop until they get that question right. They'll never be able to finish the lesson. So that's a great way to branch there. And you can have any number of these answers branch any direction you want to. Again, make sure you map it out so you get it where you want it to be. Rick, did I cover all the items?
Perfect. Thank you. And I think you've got a question from Karen about cluster questions.
Yeah. So when complete, where does it jump? Ooh, Karen, it's been a while since I've really done a cluster because I don't really like them very much. I believe the cluster, you have to, when you set it up, you have like a start of cluster and that does all of the questions. And then you have to make an end of cluster page and you determine there. I'm only like 90% sure on this answer. So I'd have to look and I can get back to you. I'm pretty sure on the end of cluster page, you set if you want it to go to end of lesson or to another page within that.
That makes sense. So the beginning of the cluster, then what would you tell it to jump to?
It picks for you. It picks one of the question pages. I don't think a cluster you can necessarily set the order. It is meant to be a randomization for you.
Well, it
So if
lets
you have a
pick.
specific order of questions, just ignore the cluster and just build a set of questions in order.
Gotcha.
It's been a while since I've built a cluster, but the Moodle Docs has. Yes, Justin, that's a very good.
I think that's going to fix my problem.
Yeah. There's a good, I should have looked at this. I'm going to build it. I can put this in the chat. There is a whole section here on doing the cluster. So this could be helpful for anyone who wants to go into that. That could be a whole session on its own, right? All right, I think we're at the end. Any final questions?
That was great. I wish we had another half hour
Yeah, it would be good.
to pick
Yeah.
your brain.
Yeah, well, I can stay on a little bit longer. I do have in the course, I can get back. There is a burning questions section. And then I would love to hear your lesson ideas to share them with the whole group. I'll be awarding some Moot bucks for those. So please share, please ask questions. I'll keep an eye on those. Thank you so much for coming. I enjoyed the questions you guys asked, and I'll stick around for a few more minutes if you have anything else you want to ask.
Thank you. Thank you. Very informative.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jess. I'll leave this open for just a little bit. So if you have any more questions, you can ask Jess. If not, then fill out the evaluation on the page. There's also from some OPI credits for continuing education. And then join us tonight for gaming, online gaming, fun times, just talks, and lots of Moot coin. So again, thanks so much. And I'll leave it open for a little bit. You can talk with Jess.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, everyone.
Hey, Jessica, I'll if you've got time, this is Rick, I'll keep asking questions for as long.
Yeah, let's do it.
So have you incorporated video at all into any of your lessons?
Yes.
I wish I knew who did it, but gosh, 2 or 3 years ago at MtMoot, when it was in person, there was a social worker case scenario that was done. And it was essentially a caseworker responding to a domestic violence report. And if anyone remembers where that was, I would love to get that. But it was, I guess my question is, so within the lesson activity, that's it.
Yeah, so it's not a
That is
lesson.
it.
Yeah.
I've been looking for that for a year.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it's actually, so H5P is a addition to Moodle.
Right. Okay.
And their branching scenario is the same, essentially the same as a lesson. It's tricky to set up. I'm still wrapping my head around a branching scenario. But this is when you said the social worker, this is what you were thinking of.
That's it. That's perfect. Now I know how to get to it. So,
Wow.
so thank you for that.
Yeah, you can
Back
definitely
to-
do this.
Back
same
to
thing
lesson,
in the
back to
lesson.
the lesson in Moodle, the lesson activity. Have you used video in any of your lessons?
Yes. So you can add video in a few different ways. Let's just mess with this first page on the demo. So if we go, all right, let me open YouTube somewhere here. Hold on. Find a video really quick. So we are, what's this? This one is called Dancing at the Mountain Moot from 5 years ago. So we're going to steal this video, hopefully not embarrass anyone. But there's a couple different ways. You can just copy and paste a link into a page, and depending on how your site's set up, it might just embed video for you. I don't know the background settings of this one. You can also get on both YouTube and Vimeo the embed codes. So on YouTube, you go to share, and then there's an embed button. And we are just gonna hit copy down here. Back to our lesson. And this you have to add in the actual HTML. You can't just paste it on the page. So this is where you can like impress your friends that don't know, that aren't techie. You're like, yeah, I know HTML. When really you don't have to know anything. But you turn on this button here with the caret bracket things. I don't know what they're called, but HTML. So if you don't know HTML, that's going to look weird, but just paste it at the bottom or somewhere if you want it in a different space. Turn HTML off, and now that video is in here for you. There are also ways to add the, let's record video. On the editing toolbar, this button here is insert or edit audio file, so you can add an MP4. Moodle isn't, I'm going to save this so we can look at it. Moodle preview isn't really designed to be a streaming service like YouTube, so it's not going to be as clean as an experience. It's getting better.
Right.
So I like to do the embedding because it's faster on the user end. This one didn't embed. They must not have the, I don't know if it's a filter or the auto linking set up. On a lot of sites though, if you just pop in this, it will embed, but without closed captioning. If you want the closed captioning for accessibility purposes, which I recommend, the embed here gives you that option when you fully embed it for the closed captioning to come through. All right, anything else, Rick, or anyone that's still here?
That's good.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, thanks again for coming, everyone.
Thanks, Jessica. That was a good intro.
Yeah, thanks for coming, Robin. All right, I'm jumping off, but if you have any questions, go ahead and stick them in the chat in the course, and I'll get back to you later.